Well, my own family's originally from the Mournes in Newcastle and County Down. Long history of the McCartans playing football in County Down with the Down team, but I don't think we're quite up to that standard at present. But I left County Down in 1969, and we went to London for a couple of years, and I met my wife over there. We got married, and we moved to Tramore in the 70s. So been here quite a long time.
And why Tramore? How did you end up here?
I was working with a man who was a half-brother of the Pipers in Tramore, and he was always telling me about the super-duper place Tramore was, and he wasn't wrong, he was right.
And then you moved here, and what was your first impressions when you came here?
Believe it or not, but the most difficult thing in the whole world is to slow down. It was easy to go to London and speed up, but to come back here and slow down, everything moved at a very slow pace then. It wouldn't be unusual for people to stop on Galway's Hill and have a 5-minute chat while everybody queued up behind them. Didn't see anything wrong with that. That was very difficult. But then when you get used to it, it's the only way to live. The rat race is no good for anybody.
That was very interesting then, I suppose, for you to come to see that coming from London.
Yeah.
And what other things struck you about Tramore when you came here? Like, I mean, obviously it was very different to London. I mean,
yeah, it was very different when we came here in the 70s as well. There was only a few thousand people here. Like, it wasn't the town it is now. But everything's on your doorstep. You have the schools, the church, the shops, the beach, the harbour, the walks along the cliffs. Everything's right on your doorstep. You don't have to get into the car to do anything if you don't want to. That was very appealing. And certainly it's an excellent place to bring up children. Because in those days, all the children used to treat the pier in Tramore as a swimming pool. And there used to be swimming lessons here as well. The Irish Life, the girls used to have swimming lessons here as well. So.
And so it was a busy place.
It was indeed very busy. It still is busy in the summertime, but nothing like it was. You'd maybe 20 or 30 kids swimming off the end of the pier here.
And that's mostly moved out to the Gillamine now, is it?
Most go out to the Gillamine swimming now, yeah, in the deeper water. Yeah.
Okay. And so from the time you came, were you always involved in fishing and boats and all that kind of stuff? Yeah,
I've come from the Mourne is a great fishing area. In fact, most people in Dunmore would know people in Kilkeel and County Down because the boats went up and down. And during the herring wars in Dunmore, it was the Kilkeel boats that were at war with the local boats, and because they considered they were taking too many of their herrings, believe it or not. It still goes on today.
So when did you start fishing yourself then?
Well, I started fishing, serious club fishing started here because we formed the Rhino Shark Sea Angling Club in 1981, a group of us in the factories in the city, and that club went on to be very famous. A lot of international anglers and world champions and all the rest. So, and we teach the young juvenile anglers, we take them away, teach them setting up traces, bait, fishing, all the rest. And amazing, young lads of 14, 15 and 16, quite often I'd meet them now 28, 29, 30 and they say, hello Jim, and I don't even know who they are. There's such a change in that age group.
And but when you were a child, did you go fishing, up around your own area?
Yeah, out of boats, but the herring fishery was big then, and you could actually make a few bob crewing in one of the boats, even at the age of 15, 16, 17. You could done, and it was a nice handy way of getting some money.
And was that one of the reasons then you came to Tramore, is that you heard that it was near the water and all that kind of stuff?
Not really, no. We were told about the great beach and the great town it was, and the buzz there was in Tramore during the summer, and the amusements and all the rest. And that's what the draw was, okay. Really, yeah.
And then we're standing here outside the sheds here on the pier. Tell us a little bit about what your first impressions of this area when you came down. What was it like then? And the men you met and all that kind of stuff.
Again, it was very different from what it is now. You had a lot of characters, shall we call them. I saw many fisticuffs over whose net should be on the outside and whose net should be on the inside, and things like that. It was a lot of great characters, a lot of fun, a lot of laughter at the time. But some very serious fishermen, they fish for a living as well. And you had the likes of the Kileys who lived just a couple of 100 metres from here, and they used to tell me that years ago they had a row everywhere. They couldn't afford sails, and the little Seagull engine, which was the first outboard engine to come here, hadn't arrived. So in the summertime they would row over to the Salines and fish for sea trout and salmon with the nets. But they used to curse the bass, literally. That's what was said to me. Bass were useless. The nets would be full of bass, and they would throw them away because there was no market for them. And then they started calling them sea bass, just to get a market, and people started buying them. But the really interesting bit was in the wintertime. What they done in the wintertime was they used to have to row out maybe 10 or 12 kilometres to the Slobs, which is a muddy area out of Kilfarasy, and to fish the whiting. And they fish there all day in the middle of winter, and then have to row back again. It must have been frozen. But they used to tell me that during the war, some of the German bombers used to come in over Tramore, and they could hear them coming from miles away. And they used to be really, really frightened. They thought they were surely going to get shot or something or other like that. But as a safeguard, they used to always have the Irish tricolour flying on the stern of the boat. And quite often the bombers would circle around the small boat, and they were frightened at what was going to happen. But eventually the crew would wave at them and carry on, and then everybody was happy again. They could carry on fishing again. But that's one of the old stories. Imagine how frightened they would have been, because they wouldn't have had a lot of contact with the outside world. So they didn't really know what was going to happen when they heard the planes coming.
And even to fish in the wintertime must have been easy.
It must have been terrible, especially when you had to row out and stay out there. Once you're 10 or 12 kilometres out, no matter how cold or wet you got, you're going to stay there for the day and catch the fish, because they took the fish in then and sold them, took them to the market and sold them. And, well, it wouldn't have been horses then, but previously before that, the fish would all have been drawn by horses. But the Kileys themselves, they used to sell the fish down on the proms, on the prom here in Tramore. In fact, there's a long history of fish selling in prom and Tramore, selling cockles and mussels as well in prom and Tramore. But that was the history of the Kileys here.
And what other families were associated with fishing?
Oh, there was a lot of families from up in West Town, mostly this side of town. All the fishermen were from. So probably for the convenience, which is strange because the fishermen, this pier was supposed to be at Newtown Cove originally and not Lady Elizabeth Cove. But the reason it's here is because the fishermen protested and said that Newtown Cove was too far for them to travel to. So they had it built here. But it would have been much better at Newtown because you had deep water all the time. There's some things about this pier that people may not even realise, such as the stones on the quayside. And those stones were put there for the horses to get a grip when they're drawing the boats or drawing the fish. And I say thousands of people walk over them every day and say they're awful hard to walk on, and they don't actually realise why they were put there in the first place.
And you pointed out earlier that over on the old...
Yeah, the old slip is different because you have two nice tracks for the cart to run on, and then you had a small path up the middle for the horse to get a grip on, because it was coming up a slope then, so it had to really pull. Yeah,
and these sheds, were they here back when you arrived?
No. A chap called Davy White put the first shed up. He was he'd done a lot of fishing out of here. He was actually from Waterford City, but he fished out of the pier here, and he put the first shed up because he would have been travelling in and out from the city all the time, so he wanted to leave all his fishing gear here. So that's how the shed started. That was the first one, and then the rest just added on.
They caught on. And the lifeboat, was that always in this location?
No, yeah, the lifeboat was, but it was in the shed behind us here with the split one. That was the original lifeboat one. It's now used by the Cliff Rescue. But not many years ago, probably about 15, 20 years ago, the lifeboat built a new lifeboat house farther up the road, which was give them a lot more room for the manoeuvre of the boats and all the rest.
And would there be different families associated with the lifeboat as to the and the fishing?
Yeah, it's a different. Yeah, a lot of respect with the fishermen for the lifeboat, obviously for obvious reasons. But yeah, there are different families would be involved with the lifeboat than would involved with the fishing. Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, would you remember many shipwrecks in your time here?
Yeah, the Michael was just before we came, but there was another one. I can't remember the name now, but it came right in. They thought they were going up into Waterford Harbour. They came right in at the White Pole, and I can remember it being there, and we went down, and the lifeboat had lifted all the crew off the night before, but then the next morning the tide went out, and the captain came ashore, and he was sitting in our car having a chat and all the rest, and customs came along and protested strongly because he left the boat. He had landed an illegal cargo, believe it or not. He hadn't permission to land his cargo there. The boat was high and dry, and he had left the boat. So that was interesting. But what exactly happened there, I don't know. They had grain for you, Ross. That's what they had on board. And I do know that some people at the lifeboat here, I saw them coming in and called them and told them that they were in danger. They kept on going and just ran straight onto the beach.
And I suppose, obviously, with the lifeboat and all that, no, there you go. Is it okay now? Yeah. Okay. I mean, obviously, with anything with the sea and all that, it's associated with tragedy as well.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I know obviously Dunmore would be far more, but there have been in this area too some tragedies over the years.
Yeah, but going over the years, there's far more tragedies in Tramore Bay than there ever was in Dunmore, because the problem was with seal, if you got southerly gales, the boats that would have been lost here would have thought they were going up the Waterford estuary, an error. And once they saw the danger, you couldn't turn around and get back out again because the wind was blowing you in all the time. It's the reason why the pillars were built on Newtown Head and Brownstown Head was to warn boats you're in the wrong place, you're in the wrong area. But there was still some came ashore. Even after that was done, the Michael would have been around about the late 70s. That had a coal on board. And then the other one, only about 15, 20 years ago, that one came in.
And what's the fishing like these days in comparison to when you came here first?
Terrible. But the fishing is terrible at present for everybody, even the commercial boats. We've got too successful at catching fish. That's the problem. You have the likes of the huge big factory ships at present, and they can take a whole shoal out in one lift. That means there's actually nothing of that shoal left to reproduce. And likes of last year, there was no mackerel coming in last year. The boats are fishing the mackerel off Cornwall, which they discovered this is where the mackerel go at winter time. So then they just fish them all the time. And the sea isn't managed very well, to be honest. There's nothing left, we better do something about it, sort of management. They don't look ahead and say, oh, if we don't do something, there's going to be nothing left.
So just react to a crisis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which I suppose that's what happened with the cod, wasn't it? Newfoundland and all that.
Oh yeah, but they fought back. Yeah. Oh yeah, Newfoundland. Oh yeah, but Iceland I was thinking about. Yeah, Newfoundland, they totally wiped the cod out. Yeah. It should have been rang alarm bells for everybody else, but unfortunately it doesn't seem to be.
People make the same mistakes.
I think it's not popular in political areas to ban boats from catching fish. It doesn't get you no votes, so it's probably the problem.
I mean, it is kind of like, I suppose, one of the last kind of hunter-gatherer kind of activities, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it was for the small boats anyhow, yeah. For the larger boats, it's a business. And but it's, even for the larger boats, like, you're talking about thousands of euros to go out. So if they don't catch, they're in big trouble. So there's a lot of pressure on the commercial boats as well to catch fish and land them. Probably at times, regardless of what the law is, but yeah, the pressure is there.
And the other way nowadays, obviously we all fishing people depend on the weather forecast. But like years ago there would have been lots of stories about things to watch out for and all that kind of stuff. Do you remember any of those ones?
No, not really, other than the red sky at night and the sailors' delight and all the rest. But just when you talk about that, there was a real disaster. I know it must have been back in the 1930s or something, when the whole fleet was wiped out up around Donegal, Derry and Down. And the reason for that is because there was no weather forecast. The fleet went out and they got hit by a storm and they had no warning of it coming. I think that it was so bad that in certain areas they built houses for the widows of the people that were lost on the boats. So just talking about weather forecasts, it's so good now, you can actually look up the internet and see what was happening. They didn't have that. And if they called it wrong, they were in big trouble. Because they only had sails as well, so if the sails blew out, then they were at the mercy of the sea.
Yeah, absolutely. It must have been scary. And then this area here, I mean, there was also an association with a haunted well. Have you ever heard anything about that?
I think everybody has a haunted well, actually. I think it's more for the tourists than for anybody else. Yeah. But just, you were saying about how scary it is in the fishing boats. There was a time when two people from the one family weren't allowed to go out in the same boat. That's how dangerous it was. It was two brothers or a father and a son wouldn't be allowed in the one boat because so many people lost their lives. And even today, with all the modern weather forecasts and everything else, look how many people still lose their life in the fishing industry. It's scary.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's that people still do it.
Yeah.
Willing to do it for the few bob they get, like. It's not like that.
Yeah, well, there used to be real good money at the fishing. Uncles of mine used to come to Dunmore fishing. They would fish 24/7 and then go back again. You could literally buy a house after a trip to Dunmore for the herrings. But those days are all gone now.
Okay, is there anything else in relation to, do you want to ask what?
Yeah, the difference when the pier become a harbour.
Oh yeah, and also you mentioned Lady Elizabeth's. You mentioned Lady Elizabeth's.
Yeah.
Could you just tell us a little bit about the history of this then?
Yeah, well, this pier was built originally. In fact, all the piers around Ireland, probably all around the UK, were built to get cargo boats in, particularly coal. The coal was needed for everything. Absolutely, coal was the petrol and diesel of the day. Everything was driven by coal, so you had to get it in. So that's what piers were built for. So the first pier that was built here only lasted about 5 or 6 years, and it washed away. And then the pier that we have today, which is a fine construction, was built to replace it. But that's exactly why this is to this day known as a pier, because you only had one wall going out. The northern wall was added later because of the wash of the Doneraile cliffs were washing straight in to the pier. So technically speaking, it's a harbour now, not a pier, but you'll be corrected quite often if you call it a harbour.
And what was the Lady Elizabeth's reference?
Well, I don't know the history there because there's a few lady coves along the way. There's obviously someone who thought they owned their own little bit of the beach to go swimming on, I would imagine.
Okay. Right, and then, and today, I mean, is there much fishing going on here?
Yeah, there still is quite a lot of fishing, but years ago it wasn't all fishing. People knew how to enjoy themselves as well. And you used to have regattas here in the bay way back in the 1930s. The walls would be lined with people, and up in the Donerail, which is a natural grandstand really for the bay, would sit there and watch the lovely sailing ships racing around the bay. That must have been spectacular. And in the 80s and 90s I was on the Cove committee here, and we tried to get the regatta started again. But the problem today is insurance. In those days you didn't have that problem, but now to get insurance cover for the likes of a regatta or anything water-based, it's very, very difficult.
Okay, well, James, that's great. And I think we'll give this man his arms a rest.
He's stuck like this for the day.
Thanks very much, James.
Okay.
That was lovely.
Hopefully
that was
that's...
great to get an overview of the whole place.